The film opens with the introduction of the main character, John. He is speaking with his psychiatrist about his mental health. We may deduce from their talk that John was a special forces officer who has since retired and spends a lot of time alone. His psychiatrist then advises him to pay visits to both his daughter and granddaughter since it is beneficial to John's mental health. Hearing that, John can only remain mute because he hasn't gone home in a long time to meet his daughter. When John returned home, he packed his belongings in preparation for his trip to the United Kingdom to see his family. The scene then shifts to John's daughter, Jane. She lived a humble life with her one and only kid. Jane works as a cleaning service at a firm, and her child attends a school near her apartment. Jane is quite busy every day. She needs to pick up her kid once she gets home from work. But Jane handled everything with grace because she felt her life will improve one day. At the same time, a thug named Sam Edie was heading to a drug dealer to inquire about where to order these illegal products, because that individual should have been a regular client of Sam Edie's gang. Returning to John, he had traveled to the United Kingdom to visit his relatives. But first, he called an old acquaintance who is now a colonel. Neil is his name. They also agreed to meet again shortly. John then raced to his wife's grave, promising to always safeguard their daughter. Sam Edie and his crew, on the other hand, are still seeking for their rival drug dealer. When Sam Edie locates the drug dealer, he dispatches him swiftly so that he does not disrupt his market. John happens to see Sam Edie and his gang. Some of Sam Edie's soldiers followed John as he escaped, but they had no idea that John was a former soldier who had expertise murdering everyone he encountered. Knowing that John had fled and slain his soldiers, Sam Edie swore John vengeance. When John arrived at Jane's flat, his daughter greeted him with a loving embrace because she hadn't seen Dad in a long time. John also pledged to never leave Jane alone again. The following day, John drove his granddaughter to school. After that, John went out and got some veggies to cook at home. When John intended to walk inside the flat, he was unaware that other criminals were following him from behind. Knowing where John resided, the mobster informed Sam Edie, who was already waiting. Sam Edie paid for everything with narcotics, which they then shared. John informed them during lunch that he will be out on duty for a few days. Jane looked downcast when she heard it. Meanwhile, John gave his granddaughter a pendant so she may always remember John and her late grandma. Jane, concerned that she might be abandoned again, implored John to pledge that he would remain safe for the sake of his family. Sam Edie determined to end John's life by tormenting his family after observing him after he had left the location. The apartment was easily accessible to Sam Edie and his crew. Jane was tormented and mistreated. Sam Edie then entered Jane's daughter's room and committed a horrific crime. Worse, they recorded all of the horrific deeds against John's family. Sam Edie realized at the moment that John was no ordinary man. He spotted a photograph of John dressed in a unique army outfit. Colonel Neil unexpectedly visited John and brought him somewhere one night. And now John is aware of all that has occurred. John's grief did not end there. Colonel Neil then led him to meet his recently deceased granddaughter. Following that, John inquired as to who had dared to touch them. Then Jane revealed that the perpetrator was the thug who ran their apartment. Without thinking twice, John went to settle the hatred that was consuming him. Sam Edie, on the other hand, was aware that his life was being threatened, so he requested one of his workers to fill in for him in charge of the flat area since he needed to leave for a bit. John went to Jane's apartment to go over the crime scene that had been inspected by the police. He came upon a police officer who stood there doing nothing. The cops provided no information to John. Fortunately, after leaving the flat, John ran across Sam Edie's guy. John inquired about Sam Edie's base camp at the moment. Sam Edie's men readily discovered their hiding location in a nightclub because he was gripped by panic. John is now in Sam Edie's base camp. There, John met Cooper, Sam Edie's employer and the area's top narcotics dealer. Cooper directed his men to ambush John, knowing that the individual who arrived was a deadly killer. Cooper begs John not to be finished, realizing he is a dangerous guy. Cooper stated that he never told Sam Edie to bother John's relatives. However, John had no pity for those who had harmed his family. The cops arrived at the club shortly after the occurrence to investigate John's slaughter. Colonel Neil was approached by the head of police, Bambi, to learn more about John. Colonel Neil described John as a killing machine who was so violent that he didn't think the cops could manage him. Sam Edie, on the other hand, received a call from Cooper's phone, which was already in John's hand. John forewarned Sam Edie that trouble is on the way. But Sam Edie was unafraid of the bluff. Sam Edie then proceeded to see an assassin named Penker and encourage him to collaborate on a new business venture. Penker declined Sam Edie's offer because he knew Sam Edie was being pursued by a lethal assassin. Sam Edie proved to be incredibly clever and cunning. He is aware that John will track him using the GPS on his phone. So he left his phone at Penker's house in the hopes that John would come there. Before leaving Penker's residence, Sam Edie directed that some of his men keep a watch on the region. And sure enough, when Sam Edie was leaving Penker's, John arrived to blast the individuals there, believing that Sam Edie was also present. Penker, it turned out, had been waiting for John's arrival. But John didn't want to say anything since he didn't want to be compromised. When John saw Penker was already in the way of the shot, he swiftly killed him, as the title suggests. After completing the massacre, John encountered one of Sam Edie's men who had been assigned to keep watch over the location. Before the guy could flee, John apprehended him and imprisoned him in a warehouse to be questioned. The man revealed what he knew about Sam Edie's plan there. As it turns out, Sam Edie intends to betray his boss in order to start his own drug operation. As a result, he wishes to eliminate John, who happened to witness his conduct, so that he leaves no trace when carrying out his new plan. Then, Sam Edie met with his new Russian distributor. They talk about certain things that will be sent by ship. Without his knowledge, John returns to complete his action. Just in case, John contacts the police so that Sam Edie might be apprehended. John kidnapped Sam Edie's guy and placed him in front of Sam Edie as an escape from the wrath that John would unleash. Knowing that John had come to take his life, Sam Edie tried to flee, aided by several of his soldiers. However, John could easily finish them off, preventing him from murdering Sam Edie. The police arrived to assist John in capturing Sam Edie, but John preferred to go one-on-one with the guy who had harmed his family. Sam Edie also said at the time that he supposedly removed the pendant that John presented to his granddaughter as a collection to always remember the sense of joy he got after murdering a kid. After murdering Sam Edie, John submitted to Bambi and was detained. Colonel Neal arrived to say goodbye to John, and it turned out that he was covertly handing John the key to free himself from the police handcuffs. The film concludes with Jane, who is relieved to hear her father's voice on the phone. She is aware that John was successful in exacting their vengeance on Sam Edie. After inquiring how his daughter is, John hangs up the phone and walks away. The movie ends here. Please like and subscribe to my channel.